We'll kick it off though. So
Oh.
good evening and welcome to tonight's live talk with Alexx Stuart. My name is Danielle and I'm a Program Development Officer with Gold Coast Libraries. So as we are on the Gold Coast, or I am, Alexx, you're in Sydney.
Yeah.
On behalf of Gold Coast Libraries, I would like to acknowledge and pay respect to the people of the Yugambeh language region, both past and present, and to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples who live here today. So this week on the Gold Coast, we are celebrating Gold Coast Green Week. And tonight we're excited to have Alexx Stuart with us to talk about how we can raise low tox kids. So Alexx is the best-selling author of Low Tox Life and the founder of the thriving online education hub by the same name. That is made up of several e-courses, a hugely popular podcast, recipes, articles, and community action resources for an ever-growing community of people wanting to be healthier and make our planet happier. So everyone feel free to ask your questions pertinent to what Alexx is speaking about in the moment via the Q&A or chat feature. And Alexx will do her best to answer your questions as she goes. But there will also be a little bit of time at the end for Q&A. So welcome and over to you, Alexx.
Thank you so much, Danielle, and to your team for having me. I am always so excited to have the opportunity to share on this topic of great passion with people out there. And as I said in the informal chat before we kicked off, to be able to join together no matter where we are from our living rooms, which I literally am at my dining table. You can see my kitchen back there, is always just a miracle to me, how we can literally change the world from our homes and unite that way, especially in times where in-person events have been really volatile. And I'm just so grateful to still be able to continue. So welcome to everyone, and thank you for joining me on this very important subject. And in fact, and please let me know where you're tuning in from in the chat window. I would love to know who's here. And thank you so much to KR Clary for your comment. I'm a teacher, so I'm very curious about this, as I've had friends turn their child's behaviour around just from changing food due to allergies and reactions. And I'm also a published author. Fantastic. And you donate them to kids, to charities. Amazing. So it's, I mean, what you've said there is really just a tiny window into what's possible when we start to connect to what this stuff is that we're putting on us, that we're putting in us, that we're having all around us, and that we're thinking, because the stress aspect of leading a low tox life is just as important to discuss. And when I started Low Tox Life, it was really born out of a personal passion for health, because I had managed to turn my health around so massively by making some very simple, small changes. I managed to all of a sudden not have PCOS anymore when I ditched endocrine disruptive chemicals, and we will be talking about those in a little minute. I managed to no longer get chronic tonsillitis, which I had 4 or 5 times a year for over a decade, simply by eliminating gluten. And once again, I am never going to tell anyone what they can and can't eat. And no whole food is evil, especially if organically grown. But different strokes for different folks is my view on food. And it is a personal conversation for you to have with practitioners as to what that mix looks like for you that's going to help you thrive. But for me, eliminating gluten was huge. And I just all of a sudden didn't get tonsillitis. It was like magic for me. So it was really this little awakening, and I wanted to see if it was the same for others, if anyone else was experiencing challenges that it seemed nothing they tried was going to work. And lo and behold, looking at what we put on us, in us, and surround ourselves with was time and again proving to be impactful in my research. So I started Low Tox Life back in 2010 to start educating. And I would just put up really simple things like, okay, this is our dental floss, and it turns out it all has a coating, and it turns out that coating is made from Teflon technology, and it turns out that technology and that material is never going to break down in the environment, but can break down into micro plastics inside our bodies through the gums, you know. And so I would share that, and then I would share ways, like different tooth flosses that I had found that didn't contain those coatings. And I would put something up, so it would be grated cheese, and I would talk about the sulfites that were often added to grated cheese, or the wood chip cellulose that was often added so that they don't clump together. And, you know, why can't we grate our own cheese anymore? Did we lose that skill? Is it really that hard? You know, those sorts of things. And that's how it began. And a lot of people united over the common sense aspects to how I taught. And I'm an experienced trainer, teacher, and facilitator in both the cosmetics industries and hospitality industries prior to starting Low Tox Life. So it's kind of my natural thing to teach and support people with the goals they have and to help them get there. And so it was a really great beginning. And then one thing led to another. You have a podcast, we have a book. And of course, you can borrow that book from your local library, which I love. But for those of you who want to have a well-thumbed copy at home, you can pretty much get it anywhere. You can still get it at Target, Big W, your local bookstore. It's very easy to get ordered in. I love supporting Booktopia as well, who are an Australian retailer, Australian owned. So what are we going to talk about tonight? It's pretty hard to do a 45-minute talk on the whole of the Low Tox life as it pertains to kids. So I'm just going to lift out a couple of key things across the 4 pillars of leading a Low Tox life: food, body, home, and mind. And then the overarching care for the planet. This is a really tricky one sometimes with little kids, teens even, to get them on board with the changes you want to make. But because they have a lot of care for the planet in their younger years, whether it's healthy or not, or a good healthy choice or not, is sometimes not going to be your way in. It's going to be caring for their natural world that can be a way to get them to stop using the slime or stuff like that. And I always say, and this is my main message to parent audiences when we're talking about raising low tox kids in a high tox world, lead with curiosity and discovery, not with deprivation and taking away, because there's nothing worse than trying to take a child's favorite thing away from them, or something that they connect to their peer group through. That's not going to be the way we're going to make changes, and we'll end up being the enemy of our child instead of, you know, really partnering with them to do things that are going to help them thrive and our planet thrive. So I wanted to start by talking, and I won't look at the chat group just now while I'm introducing. Actually, you know what? I'm even going to minimize it so I don't get distracted. But I will pick up the chat group comments in about 20 minutes time once I'm in the swing of the topics, and then I can start to kind of weave your questions through. Any that I miss, I'm going to try and get in the end of the Q&A, and I'll also send across a follow-up, like a little bit of a black book list of resources from the things that I mentioned tonight to make things really easy for you. And I'll make sure that Danielle and the team have those to get them to you. So let's talk food first, because, well, actually, you know what? I'm going to go even bigger picture first. What exactly is toxic? Because this is something that quite a lot of skeptics say things. You might have heard this yourself. You might be a skeptic yourself and like, what's this lady banging on about tonight? And we hear things like, oh, you know, I could eat all of this in my day and we're fine. Or you hear things like, oh, don't be silly. You don't need to detoxify. That's what your liver's for. Unfortunately, things just aren't like they were in my day. So 2 generations, 3 generations, 1 century ago, a lot has changed. So I'll give you a food example, because I don't know many Aussies who didn't grow up going to Macca's for breakfast or after the sports game. I know I did as a kid. And right up until 1984, a McDonald's French fry was made from potatoes. And I don't know if you, some of you who are older like me, 45 plus, might remember this too, but you'd sometimes get a Macca's chip that had like a little black bit or a brown bit, or, an imperfection. They would still be very uniform and fast food looking, but imperfections weren't, they were there. And so you didn't have the extremely harsh herbicides used in potato growing now, some of which, and Michael Pollan, a food activist and advocate over in the States, I don't know if you've read An Omnivore's Dilemma or In Defense of Food, really incredible books to start cracking open the food system. But he gives a talk at a university, and it's on YouTube. You can easily find it. So just Google Michael Pollan potato McDonald's and it'll come right up. And he talks about the extremely caustic herbicide used, where the farmers have to treat the fields and then lock themselves inside their house for 2 weeks to let that all settle and to not be poisoned by it. So poisonous it is. And I don't know about you, but I find that extremely concerning that as an everyday consumer, I'm not privy to that information. We literally have to go seek it out. And food industry knows this, governments know this, agrochemical companies know this. And of course, that means we largely just lead our busy modern lives and we don't ask questions. But I'm a big fan of asking questions and really choosing something that I know for sure is a good idea and not going to harm us. As best I can, we can only control so much. And I don't go to my mate's barbecue and say, sorry, are those carrots organic? Because, I'm probably not going to eat them. I'm not that person. I always say 90% you can control, 10% you go with the flow. And that's part of mental health in making healthy changes as well. And I'm a big, big believer in that. So that's just one small example, but add to that herbicide that's now used for perfectly uniform potatoes in McDonald's French fries. Also, several different types of genetically modified seed oils, corn oil, soy oil, sunflower oil, canola oil, all used in various cocktails and combinations around the world for fries, various additives, various preservatives so that they can be shipped around and kept perfect until they need using. But the McDonald's French fry I ate as a kid until I was nearly 10 years old was cooked in grass-fed beef tallow, as was my mum's McDonald's fry when she moved to America in 1974, as was my grandma's when she went and visited America in the 50s. So in the 60s. So this is what I'm talking about when we hear these kinds of comments. Oh, we used to have that and it was fine. A lot of the times it was fine. A lot has changed, and that's what we need to be recognizant of. So an example, for example, with a bath gel, back in the day, it was just a simple Castile soap in the 70s, right? Just a liquid soap, or a bar soap made with olive oil, really simple process. Now we have chemical cocktails inside the word fragrance. For a start, we have fragrances added to our bath products. That wasn't a thing before. And at best, you would have had some sort of an essential oil extract to give a little rosy smell or a little lemon smell. But now, under the guise of fragrance or parfum, you sometimes see, can be 150 different chemicals in proprietary blends. So it's a complete secret, and they're allowed to guard those secrets by law so that other manufacturers of perfumes don't copy their formulas. And that wasn't in Grandma's soap. So these are the sorts of things we're up against. And another thing I will say is often chemicals are assessed on an individual basis in a lab in terms of whether they're harmful or not. Some are, some aren't. But the interesting thing is very rarely are chemicals researched in groups and different combinations as they appear on ingredient lists. And of course, anyone who did chemistry in high school knows that you can have one thing that's one way, one thing that's another way, combine them, big reaction, no good anymore, stay away. And so I'm not wanting to make anyone scared. Sorry, we've just had a massive storm come in Sydney, so hopefully the sound in the background isn't worrying you guys too much. But yeah, I don't want to fearmonger. That's absolutely not what I'm trying to do. But I am trying to kind of paint the picture, if you like, that in the 2 world wars, a lot of chemical warfare was done. A lot of chemical companies were started. They had a lot of chemicals and they were manufacturing. They had a lot of jobs. They started talking to governments and said, well, we can't fire everyone. Let's find something else we can do with these chemicals. And lo and behold, they found ways to use these chemicals in different ways. So in agriculture and in cleaning products, in fragrances, there was a chemical industry boom such that about 60,000 different chemicals are used in today's world, and only about 10% of those have been extensively long-term tested. And because it is impossible for any government agency to physically test that many chemicals that get produced, there's a lot of autonomy in chemical industry to do that testing themselves in-house and literally hand over what we call a safety data sheet. So it's not exactly great science when someone else doesn't check your work. We know that, right? So yeah, that's where we're at. Now, when it comes to food, and I will actually, you know what, guys? I have one window open, so I'm going to shut that window. It'll take me 10 seconds. And that should make things a whole bunch more quiet. When it comes to food, if we look at the chemicals that have been used in food, I mentioned the McDonald's potato, for example, but there are many, many others. And my favorite one, when we're thinking of kids to remove, is the sulfite family. So the 2,2-Os, the 2,2-1, 2,1,2. This is my favorite one because there's some really good research around 2 massive issues that we experience with children's health. Number 1, asthma, higher rates than ever before in history. And number 2, behavioural issues, sensory processing disorders, ADHD, right? So sulfites are very directly shown in the research to exacerbate both these conditions. I'm not going to say cause, and I'm also not going to say if you take them away that every problem your child's ever had is going to disappear. We can't make those promises, but boy, the research is pretty clear that it'd be a very good idea to see if you could remove those sulfites. So think crumpets and pikelets ready-made at the supermarket. You want to check those. You want to check brightly coloured dried fruits. Apricots are a really big one. And I remember as a teenager being diagnosed with sports asthma. My favourite after-school snack before tennis training was dried apricots. And I would wheeze, but they were so delicious and so sweet and so moreish. I would just keep eating. But I never really thought the wheezing was because of the apricots. And it was only in retrospect when I went on my own whole food journey, learning, like years and years later, decades later, that I thought, I wonder if I had sports asthma at all. Because when I left school and went to university and didn't have my after-school snack anymore, all of a sudden I didn't have sports asthma anymore. Miracle, right? So these little things are things that I hear from parents in the community over and over and over again. So dried fruits is a big one. Grated cheese, you'll find sulfites often, and packaged bready sweet things. So always worth looking at that 200 number family. And my second favorite one in the foods, also very much connected to behavioural issues in children who find it very hard to concentrate, focus, are overexcited, and again, maybe have a bit of an issue processing things, always moving, always fidgeting, is the MSGs, the glutamates. So not just MSG itself, 631, but 627, 628, 629, 630, really that whole series of glutamates that you find in flavored chips, in flavored crackers. Think of your like barbecue flavored sakata type thing. Anything that's plain is usually safe. Anything that is flavored, so sour cream and chive, check out your Pringles, you'll see them there, that kind of thing. Anything flavored is a no. And so the best thing about that is it's an easy swap, because you're saying you can't eat, you're not saying you can't eat chips anymore. You're saying the plain ones don't have all those weird ingredients in them. And you can, a really good exercise is to actually look up what all the numbers mean with your children from age 5 and up. You can do this exercise. I've done it with preschoolers and it worked a treat. So does that sound like food to you? And a whole bunch of 4 and 5 year olds, no, in a little crew of people as I gave a presentation about brightly coloured icings. It was that one. And you know, we don't let kids in on the conversation often enough. And I find when you're just really, really honest, but very factual, matter of fact, let's look it up together. Does that sound right to you? It doesn't sound right to me. You're doing a teamwork exercise, right? So you're on the same team instead of saying, yes, you can, no, you can't. And it changes everything when you're trying to get them on board to make better choices. So then you look at the plain chips or the plain rice crackers, you're like, oh my gosh, these ones are okay. What yummy dip could we make to put them with so that it's extra tasty? And then you can make a guacamole. You can have a try at making a beetroot dip, a Mexican salsa, have a look at different recipes online and do something together to get some flavor happening. Hummus, whatever. And that's what I mean by discovery, not deprivation. So we're not trying to take something away. We're trying to have a really honest look at things. And we are then trying to look at what the better option is going to be. I prefer to say better than healthy, because then there's a stigma against healthy, unhealthy. Then, you know, in a kid's mind, they can link that to I'm a good girl, I'm a bad boy, you know, and that kind of language in their own internal head. So just a better option. Oh, this one's a good option. Oh, they've done a good job with this. It doesn't have all that weird stuff in it. Let's get a packet of this. So obviously we want to do, you know, veggies, fruits, meats, nuts, seeds, all those beautiful whole foods. But I think we're all, you know, lying to ourselves if we think our child is going to want to go through their entire life not eating chips or enjoying that kind of food with their friends. So it's really about arming them with some ideas. And one of my favorite things to do in the early years for parties was to actually bring a plate of watermelon and a big bag of plain potato chips or plain corn chips. So it's an offering. So it's generous rather than a judgment on what food is there. You're saying, oh, I just thought I'd bring a couple of things for the party table. Meanwhile, your kid and you know that's the safe stuff. Go to town on what we brought. And then they're not missing out on food at the party table. So all these things are really psychologically important so that your child doesn't feel ostracized, different, or like they're being punished for wanting party food when they can't have it because you've decided no. I just want to teach a couple of psychological things we can do through that process to make it exciting. Wow, it sounds like it's hailing outside. I'm very glad to be inside and cozy. So Jasmine is saying, this is fascinating. Chips are such a popular kids' snack. Exactly, Jasmine, super popular. And so these glutamates are being shoveled down with those orange powders on them. Think cheese and bacon balls, cheezels, twisties, all that kind of stuff. And it's excitatory. So that means it literally lights up the brain, that reward system in the brain. But for a kid, it overlights it up. So they're just like, ah. And it's very hard to bring them down a notch. So if you find that your child is sometime experiencing those sorts of behaviors, it's a brilliant one to ditch along with the sulfites. Sugar, we know, of course, is one that we want to dial back. And one of the best ways we can do that is scratch cooking our treats. And I know this can terrify people. And it's just like, oh my gosh, if you know my life, I have, 4 kids under 7 and I'm working up part-time and my husband's away, fly in, fly out. How on earth am I going to do that? I want to give you a couple of tips. My number one tip is do not feel like you need to be some sort of master chef and make new stuff every single week. And win some sort of secret lunchbox award that's never going to be handed out to you. Our kids' lunchbox is very, very simple, and there are a couple of variations here and there sometimes, but it pretty much consists of a good wrap with some mixed nuts because his school allows them, but you could do popcorn or something else in place of that, a container of crudités, a piece of fruit, and then I like to call it something that looks like what the other kids have. So that'll be like a little container of corn chips or popcorn or something like that. That kind of a thing. And he's super happy. That's just what lunch looks like. And so sometimes, every now and then, I'll bake a batch of bickies, but I don't bake a different recipe every week. I bake 2 on rotation that I know off the back of my, I'm half French, and the running joke in my family is I suck at expressions because I learned expressions from an English as second language mum. Like the back of my hand. Anyway, off by heart, I know that one. So and so I make our therapeutic chocolate chip cookies, and I make the ginger millet cookies, and I just kind of tend to change up the ginger ones by adding a bit of chopped apricot through, or doing tiny little things like that, making them chopped chip one week, or actually our vanilla shortbreads. And yes, they're recipes I created, so you can get all of these on the Low Tox Life website. And we actually have an A to Z recipe function that you can actually look at everything alphabetical. And so you'll see cookies or biscuits and there'll be a big list. But I created recipes like the Choose Your Own Adventure cake so that you could learn a base recipe and then just change it up. And so you don't have to get out a recipe book every single time. And this is the kind of thing that helps us be able to scratch cook, is when we commit something to memory, when we get really confident and good at it, instead of feeling like we have to start from scratch all the time. So those are my big tips on starting to look at our food. And then in terms of habit and exposure, my number one is just don't bring your kids to the supermarket. If you have to shop at a supermarket, and I completely understand if you do, especially in regional areas where it's even harder to have different options, different grocers, different delivery ideas, then do it online if you can and get it delivered, and have the times that you're going to buy food with your kids as much as you possibly can reserved for things like a monthly or weekly or fortnightly trip to the farmer's market, so that they start to see what buying food actually should look like, and not like the big, bright light, hideous experience in a supermarket where pretty much everything in the middle is not really necessary for human thriving, And it just takes the pressure off having less exposure to all that stuff all the time. And it puts you in the driver's seat a bit more easily than, Mom, can I have this? It just doesn't happen. So that can be really helpful. So someone's asking, I thought corn chips were the healthier choice than potato chips. I heard plain corn chips are not healthy, as corn is used to fatten up cattle. What would be the better choice, please? Plain potato or plain corn chips? Look, everything in moderation. Once it comes to simple food that hasn't got a ton of additives, there's nothing wrong with a handful of chips here and there if you're eating lots of fruits, vegetables, meat, nuts, seeds, eggs, sustainably and traceable caught fish. If you're eating a whole food diet, whole grains, whatever you eat in that department, then it's really just not going to be a huge issue. Some people find corn chips better because they react to nightshades. So potato is a nightshade vegetable, can be inflammatory for some genotypes, but not generally in the children's population. And some people find corn to be an allergen. So really, once we start eliminating all the weirdness and we just focus on real simple food, and if we're buying packet food, real simple ingredients, it starts to become much easier to have a conversation with your body about what's working and what's not, what feels good, what doesn't feel good. But me personally, I'm okay with a handful of corn chips here and there in the lunchbox or at a party. It's not something we eat every day, and therefore it's not something I really worry about too much. As I always say in my talks, so I will be saying it now, it's not what you do some of the time that counts, it's what you do most of the time. So knock yourself out and just find a brand, organic if possible, obviously, because potato and corn can definitely be genetically modified. Potato and corn can both be heavily sprayed. So I would definitely caution against conventional if you can possibly make that switch, if it's available to you when you're buying a kid's treat in a packet in that form. Do your children ever have foods that have the 200s and 600s in them? The occasional birthday party or Christmas treat? Do you think once in a while is okay? Anne-Marie, that is such a great question. And I will say it is really important to bio-individualize food. So if you gave a child on the spectrum or with a clinically diagnosed ADHD case, if you gave those children a red jelly, snake or frog, or glutamate containing Pringles, that might send them around the bend for days, unable to calm down. It can be extremely neurodisruptive. So it really just depends on your child. If you've got a child who doesn't have any health presentations, issues, challenges, and tends to be a really good eater with their, 3 a day and eating their fruits and veggies, 3 meals a day and eating fruits and veggies, then personally, it wouldn't freak me out if I looked across at the room and I saw my 11-year-old boy eating a red frog at a party. He wouldn't. He probably, just because he's literally been raised from birth to kind of know what's in everything and has made his own decisions. I definitely don't shame him for any choice he makes. And I definitely wouldn't have an issue with it because my boy doesn't have those neurodivergences. So it really just does depend on your situation rather than a blanket, yeah, don't worry about it all the time for all the kids, or no, absolutely not for all the kids. You know what I mean? Like nothing is black and white, unfortunately, which does make things more complicated. But I do find that does mean we've all got a bit more flexibility to decide where we draw the lines. And for me, it's really just about waking up to what's in stuff, starting to be a bit more scrutinizing of what we buy and how it affects us, our children, the planet. The less additives, the less weird chemical company factory thingies we're going to need to produce all this stuff. And the lot of energy when it comes to climate change is spent on ultra processed foods. So if we can minimize those, it's actually one of the biggest ways we can make an impact. Everyone keeps fighting meat, no meat, plant-based, yada, yada. But really, ultra-processed foods and food waste are much bigger significances when it comes to us looking after the planet as well. So I've had a question here. We just learnt through Seaspiracy that there is not really such a thing as sustainable fish. Would seaweed be a great alternative? As fish get their omega-3 oils from algae they eat. So the interesting thing about sea vegetables is they can be very high in DHA, but they're very low in EPA. And EPA is protective for a whole bunch of different reasons to DHA in terms of our health. We need both. Unfortunately, also plant-derived sources can be much harder, not algae, but like say flax, omegas, can be much harder for our bodies to turn into active EPA DHA. And unfortunately, our bodies don't make that stuff. So we do actually need to consume it. So yes, algae oil can be amazing, especially for DHA, which is great for heart health. There's a lot of research there, but you do want both. And unfortunately, Seaspiracy, while I loved it for what it started as a conversation, it is a filmmaker who is known for agenda-based documentary filmmaking, which means the stories where things are actually done in a really good way aren't told. And that's really unfortunate, because I think if we actually celebrated everyone doing good things, no matter how everyone eats, then we would actually get a lot further with a lot less fighting and a lot more transparency, because we'd all be fighting for the same things. So I know, for example, Nordic Naturals, which is a fish oil company, are an incredible company who are very transparent and do excellent work to produce a great fish oil. So nothing is black and white, even when a documentary filmmaker tells us that it is. I really commend him for his incredible uncovering of what some of those sustainable associations, how they're funded, and some of the travesties in the fishing industry. But there are actually some amazing people doing good things in every type of farming, of every type of food. So I don't like to discount anyone. How toxic are farmed fish? Antibiotics in them. Haruko, unfortunately, farmed fish, as we're seeing, really aren't a great choice. You do want wild, you do want line caught if you do eat fish products. The name of the game is transparency with fish, and it really pays to buy as locally as possible, and to think about eating smaller fish in general, and squid, because they replenish much faster and it's much less taxing on the ocean systems. So I would actually dial down the amount of, definitely try and avoid farmed salmon if you can. But it's hard. Australia, we have such a massive farmed salmon industry. It's almost impossible to find local wild salmon. We have it as a treat sometimes, but it comes from Canada. So we really do try to minimize that, and we get our EPA and DHA from fish oil, eat less fish, because I've found a fish oil that's completely traceable and regenerative in the way that they produce it. So these are the kinds of, and anyone who is new to thinking low tox and food, like, this might be blowing your mind to the point where you're like, oh my gosh, how am I even going to start with this? That's a conversation probably for 1 or 2 years down the track, when you've just started to implement things and work to start seeing direct relationships between what you're buying, how it affects you, how it affects the planet. It's a huge undertaking, and it's not a 1-week job. It's definitely not a 1 webinar jobby. So think about, I'll move on to personal care, because I really want to make sure I give that some time as well tonight, especially because that can really affect our kids. And we're seeing much more eczema, psoriasis, dermatitis, hives than ever before in our kids. It seems super normal to head to the pharmacy and grab a cream or this or that. People seem to be living at pharmacies. So we really need to have a look at that as well. So if you've got any more questions, I might try and get to them at the end, but I'm going to move on to personal care now. So with personal care, as I mentioned at the start, one of the big things is fragrance. So fragrance can contain something called phthalates. For any of the nerds who are writing down notes, I'm a nerd too. I always go, I want to research that later. PHTHALATES. And phthalates are a plasticizer. And you find them in, unfortunately, those slime products that are at the kind of eye level of the kid at the checkout of the toy store. So you definitely don't want to be buying those. But you also find them in some cheap playmat equipment, unfortunately, cheap $2 shop kind of balls and toys. Think the sticky plastic. So if your foot kind of sticks to it, in that PVC way, those like raincoat way, then it's very high in phthalates. Luckily, new generation PVC doesn't contain phthalates. So if you bought your raincoat for your kid in the last year or two and it's from a reputable brand, very high chance that there are no phthalates. And I'm just about to explain what that means, by the way. So they're found in those bendy, stretchy plastics, but the role that they play in perfume is to make fragrances last. So as a plasticizer, they create long-lasting fragrances. So you know that way when you catch up with a girlfriend, you have coffee, you leave, you give her a big hug and a smooch at the end, and you say, it was great, good to see you. And then you're picking up the kids from school, or you're cooking dinner and your kind of hair brushes past your face and you smell their perfume, but like 10 hours later, or you can smell it on your jumper. That is the phthalate doing its job, making that fragrance long lasting. Now, why is that an issue? Well, so they're very endocrine disruptive. Phthalates mimic and or block our natural estrogen hormone production. This is disastrous for chicks trying to balance their cycles, trying to get pregnant. But it's also disastrous for men in that it can affect sperm function. It can affect the way that the genitals are formed in utero of baby boys. There's actually a heartbreaking study done on phthalate factory workers that showed that there was a very high cluster incidence of deformity of male sexual organs of baby boys born to factory workers in the phthalate factory. Now, I don't know about you, but as a parent, that horrifies me. And the Go Low Tox e-course that I've been running since 2014 has meant a lot of people have learnt about this particular group of chemicals, the phthalates. And I've had 3 women reach out to me privately and say that their children were born with micropenises. And this is one of the side effects of high phthalate exposure. Now, I am not telling you this to freak you out and make you terrified and hate the world. It's more like a bit of a tough love thing where we've got to know the bad stuff to know how we get to the good stuff. So whenever you see the word fragrance on a fabric softener, on a scented candle, on a plug-in air freshener, on a car Christmas tree thingy, get those things out of your cars now. The plug-in car air fresheners that you put on the little air vents, on your body lotion, on the shampoo. It is in so many different things, synthetic fragrance. And just start, it's a tough one because it's so big, and I can totally understand that it can be really, really, whew, oh my goodness, you know, if you learn about this for the first time. But what an empowering thing to know and to start thinking, yeah, how do they get vanilla creme brulee into a candle anyway? Or I've been to the beach and this fabric softener doesn't smell like the ocean, you know, like ocean fresh or spring breeze. And just start raising your awareness on whether the thing smells like the real thing. And if it doesn't, so not essential oil based, for example, because some fragrances can be, and you'll see an asterisk made with 100% essential oils, then you want to start moving on to things that are either fragrance free or using essential oils. And in the little black book list that I'll send you post webinar in the next couple of days, you'll have a ton of options that you can move to. So, so the best thing about learning about phthalates and synthetic fragrance is, if you think about it, you can actually save a ton of cash in this category if you've been using a lot of the conventional supermarket products. Fabric softener, you do not need. Half a cup of bicarb soda, and you can just buy a big tub of bicarb in bulk. It's cheap as chips. And 20, 30 drops of an essential oil is going to give you fabric softener and a really nice light scent. Some of the low tox laundry washes like your Eco Store or your Aware, really great options. Basistos, eucalyptus, have some lovely subtle fragrances to them already, which is great. So you don't need the scented candles, get honey beeswax. You don't need the plug-in air fresheners, start diffusing essential oils. Maybe try nothing at all. We've moved on to barely having any fragrances in the home at all. Sometimes some essential oils if we fancy it. I love rosemary, not burning, but diffusing rosemary or lemon for focus if I'm having a really busy day at work. But we just don't need all of these synthetic fragrances coming at us from all different angles. And the beautiful thing is, trust me when I say, when I started making my swaps 15 years ago, it was really hard and you had to make quite a few hippie sacrifices to not use the synthetic stuff. But these days we are spoilt for choice and there's so many great brands doing good things by people, animals and planet, and that still perform, because we still want stuff that performs, right? So that is my hot tip. Just look at the synthetic fragrances in your life and start making swaps there. So remember, in doing this, we're going to eliminate the exposure to phthalates, which means we're going to reduce the impact on our natural hormone systems, especially in children that are developing in their early years very, very fast. And it's going to mean that they have the best chance of hormone balance that we can give them leading into puberty. So it's a really, really amazing impact that we can have. But the good news about phthalates is anytime you start not using some of these synthetically fragranced products, your body actually can quite easily detoxify from phthalates because it's a water-soluble chemical. So that's the good news. There we go. So the other one I wanted to mention in relation to eczema, psoriasis, hives is SLS and SLES, so sodium lauryl sulfate and sodium laureth sulfate. These days, hardly any home has a nice, simple bar of soap in the shower or on the kitchen sink. We've got all these pumps and gels, and often they contain sodium lauryl sulfate or sodium laureth sulfate. And neither of these things were intended as personal care products. And yet we're putting them on our skin, we're putting them in our baths. And I want you to turn your product around and have a look at whether it's got SLS or SLES. And if it does, to actually start using that as dishwashing detergent with gloves on and switch out to a bath gel or bar soap. Bar soap's great because then you eliminate the plastic as well. It's an easy win. But a bath gel that doesn't contain SLS. And again, there are a ton of great low tox brands these days to help you make that choice. I've got, and then the reason you want to avoid those two is not because they're hormone disruptive, but they're skin disruptive. And there are so many studies that link both of those chemicals to eczema and dermatitis exacerbation. And kind of like we were talking about with sulfites in food, I can't promise you that by taking them away, eczema and dermatitis are gone, but logic sort of says that anything that's aggravating it should be taken away so that the skin can relax and have a better chance of healing. As well, we really want to look at the body creams and body products we're putting on our kids for those SLS, SLES, and synthetic fragrances, and really just starting to swap them out. And I've got a ton of ideas and examples in the follow-up. Have we got some questions? Yes. Basistos is great. I'm glad you like it. A good Aussie brand as well. Laurie is saying performance in deodorants. The natural aluminium free just don't seem to last that long. So my favorite one to recommend for myself, for teens, for tweens as well, is the Fresca brand. It's a roll-on brand. And I find the unscented works much better than even the naturally scented with essential oils. And my theory on unscented is that actually, because our armpits are such a massive pathway for detoxification for the body and elimination and lymph stimulation, that anything that is foreign, so a fragrance of any kind, natural or synthetic, sends our body into a bit of a panic and gets it producing a whole bunch of sweat to eliminate anything on the surface of the skin that shouldn't be there. I switched to the Fresca unscented, and literally whole day, no problems, no stink. And it's what my son will be starting to use soon too, who's 11. That's what he'll use. Now, if you're a marathon runner, spin instructor, you really need something that you just don't have to think the whole rest of the day, you might want to go for, and the Fresca isn't powerful enough for you. I'm pretty active. I play tennis and I don't get stinky. And I don't play like light doubles tennis. I like to pretend I'm a 25-year-old pro on the court. It's my Achilles heel. I love it. And I find that that's just fine for me. But some people really like the Axilla by Black Chicken Remedies, or the No Pong is another good one as well. Do you have a brand for cleaning products? Alana, I love EcoStore. It's available at Woolies. Their loose dishwashing powder is brilliant. Their dishwashing detergent, really inexpensive at about $4 or $5. It's a great brand. Stay away from Earth. They use synthetic fragrances and colours in their products, unfortunately. And then for cleaning and laundry, Aware is another good one that I use. Other cleaning products that I use are the Thieves, Young Living Thieves household cleaner concentrate, because you just put a couple of caps full in one big bottle and spray. So that's one of my favourite products. And also Resparkle, which is a really great plastic minimised cleaning brand from Australia. And it's actually really cool. You get these beautiful silicone coated bottles in your first order. And then she has her cleaning products, so it concentrates in powder form that you put in the bottle and then fill it up with water. So there's some really cool stuff happening in the land of cleaning that's totally low tox. And the beauty of moving to that kind of stuff is that your kids can get cleaning too, and they're not using caustic chemicals. Win, because we all know kids love to clean. Not. So the last thing I wanted to mention, and we've kind of been going through questions as we go, so I'm actually quite happy to just keep, yes, Mugu's a great low tox brand, whoever's just asked that. An anonymous person, asked in the Q&A, no problems. I can just see the Q&A here. I'm just going to see if I've missed anything. Answered, opened. I've noticed a lot of foods have sugar that I whisk to expect. I think that might be a typo, e.g. veggie stock has glucose. What are some other secret code names for added sugar? Maltodextrin, sucrose, sucralose, glucose, sugar beet. Like you might see sugar beet and think, oh, that's a vegetable, but no, it's sugar. Cane is sometimes the word used. They can be very sneaky, but yeah, you really have to sneak it to become a label warrior, to pick it up on all of it. And actually watching the film That Sugar Film with your kids is a great way to start ditching the sugar as a family. Again, I'm big on team rather than I'm telling you can and can't do stuff. That just tends to cause fights. So, yes, you'll probably be able to watch the recording later. Actually, I don't want to speak for you, Tanya, but maybe it'll be sent as a playback. Yes, okay, thank you. Yeah. Thank you for answering that. I was just like, oops, it's not my webinar. So yes, you will be able to watch the playback later. Do not fear. And yeah, just have at it with your kids. Let's make me the bad guy. Say, see, the lady's talking us through it. It's not me, it's her. I'm happy to be that scapegoat for you, Haruko. So the last thing I wanted to mention is the home. And in the home, we have two environmental toxins that are very important. One that is quite emotional for me because I've been severely affected over the past 5 years with it. My son also to a lesser degree, thank goodness, and that is mold. So we have a ton of resources on the lowtoxlife.com website and on our Instagram at lowtoxlife. If you scroll back, we did a whole bunch of posts in February and January about humidity minimization, tools, resources, appliances you might want to look at. But there are two issues with mold. You might be getting mold, and we're all on the East Coast here, being Queensland, New South Wales. So you might be getting mold because you have too much humidity inside and not enough good airflow, and you live in a humid climate. So that can cause mold. But also what can cause mold is things like leaks or unattended pipes that need fixing, or roof tile cracks where it's getting into the roof space. And then eventually mold starts to grow, in fact, after 48 hours. So this is why you never want to ignore a leak. You want to call that plumber yesterday when there's any kind of leak. You want to get the roof guy out yesterday. It is just so important. Mold is extremely neurotoxic, and it's looking like the science shows us to about a quarter of the population who have genes that the people with those particular genotypes don't produce antibodies. So it's like your body doesn't recognize that it's a toxin. So it can just grow and grow and grow and proliferate, ends up inflaming all your organs, and it causes so many nasty things. But it can cause respiratory things. Like I used to call my boy Mr. Snuffleupagus when he was a baby, and it just turns out we lived in a moldy apartment. And because when we moved, he was a silent sleeper, literally after a week. The beauty of kids is they detox very fast. Adults who've been in mold for a few years, not so much. And I can trace my health at its peak of thriving to its lowest of lows to the exact houses that I remember experiencing mold. And growing up, I just thought, oh, that's just a bit annoying. And unfortunately, it's far more than annoying. So please do resource yourself if you think you have a mold issue, a humidity issue. The best thing you can do living on the East Coast is preventative. So we have a dehumidifier that lives in our bathroom, and it goes from the bathroom to the laundry whenever we're using either of those rooms, like after showers for a few hours, just to really dry the whole thing out, and then you don't get any mold that you have to try and figure out how to clean. And then we have another one that oscillates between the two bedrooms to just keep everything dry. And then we don't have any issues. So that's a really, really important one, mold. And then EMFs, the last one. So wireless technologies. The number one thing you can do is to just turn that Wi-Fi modem off overnight when everybody is sleeping. And whenever possible, take an extra meter, take an extra half meter. I mean, I've got a phone case here, and I'll put the sleeve details in the follow-up. But if I look at my phone here, the reading is going to be through the roof. If I look at it there, it's much, much better. If I listen to it across the table, much, much better. AirPods are a no. Back to dehumidifiers, my favorite appliance is the Philips 5000 series because it's a dehumidifier and air purifier. But a great Aussie brand is OzClimate as well. And we have Ion Max too. So those are some really good dehumidifiers. AirPods are a wireless technology. So I would tend to say no, but I'll give you a couple of resources that you can do a bit of EMF reducing shopping and protection, because it's really just not an exact science yet that it's safe. And we do need to just be mindful and just say, you know what, while the science isn't figured out and while they're all fighting, I'm just going to make sure that I look after my family. And the easiest ways we can do that are if your kid's watching a movie on the iPad, just put it in airplane mode, download the whole movie, and then let them watch it in airplane mode. If you're the last one going to bed at night, switch off the modem. And whoever gets up in the morning to use any computer devices or anything, then you can switch it back on. But just creating those places of low technology and making sure we get some really good quality nature time is hugely important to the balance of us as creatures on planet Earth. So I think it's kind of a nice little spot to finish. And I might, and I know that was a little bit rushed to talk about those couple of quite big topics, but please do take a listen to the Low Tox Life podcast. We've talked about mold and EMF on several occasions with some incredible doctors, PhD scientists, etc., who are a wealth of knowledge on those topics. So please don't think that this is your last chance to ask anything about these sorts of topics. See it as the beginning of a learning journey, not the end. No need to panic. Best product to remove air pollutants, i.e. toxic smells. I'm a big fan of the Australian made and produced Innovair filters. We had one during the bushfires last year, and a filter, the pre-filter, which should last 6 months, lasted 3 weeks. That's how polluted the air was. That's how hard that filter was working. So if you live on a busy intersection or on a main road, that kind of thing, or if you do a lot of frying, cooking, then you might want to invest in an air filter as well. But there is nothing more important than being out in wild spaces in nature rather than trying to clinically protect ourselves in our indoor environment. So I just wanted to mention that, because we often try to make everything so perfect in our houses and spend 90% of our time indoors, when really just as much of a focus should be getting out in nature as well, because it's just nothing that makes you feel as good as a walk on the beach or in the forest, swim in the lake kind of stuff as well. So it's 8:31. My last piece of Low Tox Kids advice, because I definitely don't want to keep anyone over time, is stress. So overscheduled, overbusy, overwhelmed is not a great space for our kids to be. And food, body, home, and mind, the mind part is so important to all the other parts working. You often have kids with digestive issues or behavioural issues, and actually just ditching a couple of activities and spending a bit more time in nature can sometimes be just one of the most powerful ways to look after our kids' health. And in a world that makes us think, I've got to buy this to help them be healthy, I've got to buy that, I've got to, no, we've got to just go to the beach sometimes and just relax and just think, do they even like the saxophone lessons? Like, could we save money there and save some time and save some driving around? Just have a little think. I always like to look at my diary and look at the week ahead and think, am I excited about all of that? Is there anything I'd change if I could do my time again, organising my diary? Why don't we teach our kids to do the same and to really think about where they're putting their energy in their beautiful little lives, so that they don't grow up into overcommitted, burnt out adults like so many people in our generation have. And so that is kind of where I want to leave it, so that you've had the full gamut of ideas on where you might like to go next to improve the health of your gorgeous family out there. So I think I've got a couple of last minute questions. No, it was just a couple of comments. I hope that was helpful, KR. Thanks for your questions. Thanks everybody for their questions. Hey, Danielle.
Hello. Thank you so much for that, Alex. That was such an informative presentation. I really like, though, that you say don't aim for perfection, just start with small changes.
Oh my gosh, yes. And I might say to that, have a think about what lit you up. I mean, we talked about a lot of stuff just then, but if you thought, oh my gosh, I can't wait to get to the pantry and have a look at the whether there are any additives in the top 2 snacks that we eat in this household, start there. Don't start with phthalates. If that wasn't the thing that if that overwhelmed you, just shelve that for a little bit, do a bit more research, take a course, do that kind of stuff, listen to a couple of podcasts and learn more. But the thing that you're excited about changing now, start there.
Just start with that. Yeah, that's great. And where would you recommend you get those food additive, lists from? Do you have anything like that on your website, or do you know?
Yeah, so we've actually got like a little mini course that's, I think it's only $39, that is a going additive free guide, and I kind of talk you through some of the best options, give you the best list, like the most important list of things to ditch and how you can spot them on labels. Another option is an app called Chemical Maze, And that you can buy. I think they sell it for like $9 on the iTunes store, and you can punch in different additives, and it gives you a bit of a traffic light system on, like, so that can be really easy when you're shopping down the aisles. That's where I'd start.
Okay, that's great. Well, thank you so much. And everyone, thank you for joining us tonight. As Alexx mentioned, if you want to find out more, head to her website, lowtoxlife.com.au. You can follow Alexx on social media at lowtoxlife. So I follow her on Facebook and Instagram. You can order or download a copy of Low Tox Life. It's such a good book. I've got a copy. Oh, it's a shot. There's so much great information in here, and in more depth of what you've covered tonight, of course. Or you can also purchase a copy through the Low Tox Life website or from all good bookstores. So Alexx is going to be visiting us in person in October. So save the date, Wednesday the 20th of October, and she will be launching her next book. I've got a picture of it here. Hopefully you can see that. Low Tox Life Food. So we are really excited for that.
Oh, thanks so much. I am too.
Yeah, it'd be great to see you then in real life. So everyone, thank you for joining us tonight, and thank you again, Alexx. That was fantastic. We do have a survey that will go out after this, so if you could complete that, it would be greatly appreciated. But other than that, enjoy the rest of your evening, everybody.
Awesome. Thanks, Danielle.
Thanks, Alexx. Thanks, everyone. Good night.